Court TV will be bringing you the trial of a Florida teenager who's accused of killing his mother. But the bizarre twist is that he also killed his father. So this morning, we're shining the spotlight on 17-year-old defendant Colin Griffith, and also the strange set of circumstances that led up to the deaths of his parents.
A teenager is standing trial on charges he murdered his mother just 18 months after he killed his father. But the defendant says he acted in self-defense both times. Colin Griffith, 17, is charged with kidnapping and first-degree murder in the stabbing death of his mother, Catherine Griffith, on September 8, 2024. In a quiet suburban neighborhood in Charlotte County, Florida, a Sunday evening unfolds like any other. Neighbors are having dinner, watching TV, and preparing for the upcoming week. No one suspects that behind the closed doors of one home, something has happened. Something that will soon shake even the most experienced investigators. At 6 p.m., a call is placed to emergency services. The voice on the other end is young, steady, and devoid of panic. The caller reports an accident in a calm, almost detached manner. As the dispatcher asks questions, his responses remain short, precise, and eerily rehearsed. When officers arrive, they are greeted by a teenage boy standing outside. He appears composed, his hands tucked into his pockets, his expression distant. Inside the house, they uncover a deeply unsettling scene. Soon, detectives will begin unraveling the events of the day, searching for inconsistencies in his account and digging into the family's past. They suspect this case is merely the beginning, that the real story started long before that night, leaving behind someone whose presence had gone unnoticed. The Griffith family appeared to be an average middle-class American household. They lived in Tulsa, Oklahoma, a city known for its calm atmosphere and strong family values. But beneath the surface, deep-seated tensions simmered, eventually setting off a tragic chain of events. Charles Griffith was born on September 12, 1980, in Tulsa. Raised in a disciplined household, he grew up under the strict rules of his military father and his mother, an elementary school teacher. From an early age, he was taught to follow orders without question, to be resolute in his decisions, and to suppress his emotions. This upbringing would later shape how he ran his own family. Catherine Moore, born on May 3, 1985, in Jacksonville, Florida, had a starkly different childhood. Her parents, Robert and Linda Moore, had lived in the same home in Charlotte County, Florida, for decades. She was raised in a warm, supportive environment, nurturing her dream of becoming a teacher. She had a natural gift for working with children and believed in treating others with kindness. The two met in 1999 at the University of Oklahoma. Catherine had moved from Florida to study education, while Charles was pursuing a business degree. Confident and ambitious, he quickly caught her attention. Their relationship progressed swiftly, and by 2001, after 2 years of dating, they were married. Catherine was 16, and Charles was 21. Shortly after, their first son, Christopher Griffith, was born on June 1, 2002. As they tried to build a life together, Charles's controlling nature began to surface. He imposed strict household rules, managed all financial decisions, and demanded absolute obedience. Their second son, Colin Griffith, was born on October 14, 2006. Catherine had hoped that expanding their family would bring them closer. But instead, Charles became even more authoritarian. He viewed his sons as extensions of himself and was determined to raise them with unwavering discipline. This was especially true for Colin, who displayed an unusual emotional detachment from an early age. By the time Colin was 5, warning signs were evident. He rarely showed emotion, didn't respond to discipline like most children, and often stared at people without blinking. While Catherine found his behavior unsettling, Charles saw it as a sign of strength. After nearly 19 years of marriage, Catherine could no longer endure her husband's overbearing ways. In 2020, she filed for divorce. The separation was finalized on August 17, 2020, with the court granting Charles full custody of Colin, citing his financial stability and ability to provide structure. Catherine, lacking a high-paying job, struggled to prove she was the better choice for custody. She moved back to Charlotte County, Florida, to be near her parents, but never stopped fighting to regain custody of Colin. Despite filing multiple appeals, Charles continually blocked her efforts. Meanwhile, Colin grew increasingly withdrawn. At school, he barely interacted with peers, preferring to immerse himself in video games. At home, he lived under rigid rules, where any sign of weakness was met with severe discipline. Catherine received occasional messages from him, but they were distant, lacking warmth or emotion. Then, in 2023, 3 years after the divorce, she received a call that would change everything. Charles Griffith was dead, and Colin was in custody as a suspect. What followed sent shockwaves through Charlotte County, igniting public debate and intense scrutiny. On February 14, 2023, emergency services received a call from a teenager who reported shooting his father. Speaking in a calm voice, Colin Griffith stated that he had acted in self-defense. When asked if medical assistance was needed, he simply replied that his father was no longer alive. When officers arrived, they found 15-year-old Colin sitting on the couch. On the floor lay the body of Charles Griffith with 2 gunshot wounds, one to the chest, the other to the head. The firearm was nearby, and only Colin's fingerprints were found on it. Life with his father after the divorce had been anything but easy. With full custody, Charles maintained complete control over his son's life. Any disobedience was treated as defiance, with immediate consequences. Colin was forbidden from contacting his mother or leaving the house without permission. Any attempt to challenge his father's authority was met with threats or the removal of basic privileges. Tensions between them had been escalating. Charles demanded perfection, expecting Colin to follow every rule without question. But the breaking point came when Colin confided in his father about his orientation. Charles took it as a personal affront, and their relationship became a battlefield. Feeling trapped with no way out, Colin claimed that on the night of the incident, his father returned home in a foul mood. A heated argument quickly turned physical. Colin stated that Charles grabbed a knife and threatened him. Fearing for his safety, he took his father's gun and fired twice. However, the investigation raised doubts. Charles had been shot twice, once in the chest and once in the head, suggesting that after the first shot, he was still alive but unable to resist, making the second shot a deliberate final action. Colin displayed no fear, panic, or remorse. His steady, unchanging version of events surprised even seasoned detectives. He didn't try to justify himself, nor did he express concern about potential consequences. Catherine Griffith received news of her ex-husband's death late that evening. When police called, she initially thought it was a mistake. Learning that her son was in custody left her in shock. But after the initial wave of disbelief, relief followed. Charles could no longer control her or Colin. Yet that relief was soon overshadowed by a harsh reality. Her son had taken a life. Detectives remained uncertain about the full truth, but without concrete evidence to disprove Colin's claims, prosecutors accepted the self-defense argument. Within weeks, the case was closed, and Colin was released without charges. Few realized that this was only the beginning of an even more disturbing tragedy. In late March 2023, just over a month after his father passed away, Colin Griffith relocated to Charlotte County, Florida, where his mother, Catherine, now had full custody of him. She hoped to start anew, creating a safe and stable home for her son. Initially, things seemed uneventful. Colin enrolled in a local high school while also taking community college courses, and Catherine worked to maintain the image of a normal family life. She frequently shared photos of their time together on social media, beach outings, family dinners, and holiday celebrations. Friends and relatives in the comments expressed their happiness that she had finally reunited with her son. Yet beneath these cheerful images, an unsettling reality remained hidden. Colin remained emotionally distant, showing little connection to his mother. He rarely spoke to her, never expressed gratitude, and spent most of his time playing video games. School didn't interest him, and whenever Catherine asked him to help with household responsibilities, he responded with frustration. At first, she attributed his behavior to the emotional toll of recent events. But soon, it became evident that the problem ran much deeper. Over time, concerning signs began to surface. Colin would lash out unexpectedly when things didn't go his way. He isolated himself for long hours, ignoring his mother's calls. When they argued, his expression remained eerily blank, even when Catherine was in tears. By fall 2023, tensions had escalated. Catherine tried setting limits on his gaming and encouraged him to focus on school and household chores, but Colin exploded in anger. He threw his controller against the wall and stormed out of the house without a word, only to return hours later as if nothing had happened. The situation worsened in November 2023 when another serious altercation occurred. When Catherine once again asked him to take on responsibilities at home, he reacted with aggression, shoving her to the ground, grabbing her by the hair and pinning her down while shouting threats. His grandmother, who was in the house at the time, witnessed everything and immediately called the police. When officers arrived, Colin attempted to justify his actions, claiming his mother had attacked him first. However, his grandmother's testimony contradicted his claims, leading to his arrest on charges of domestic violence. Following his arrest, Colin underwent a psychiatric evaluation where doctors identified severe behavioral issues, including a lack of empathy, an inability to express remorse, and heightened aggression. Despite recommendations for long-term therapy, he was released after several months and sent back to live with Catherine. Fearful of her own son, she confided in friends but felt helpless. She still loved him, yet she also sensed he had become a real danger. As she reflected on his past actions, she even began questioning his self-defense claim regarding his father's death, wondering if he had acted out of something more sinister than fear. After his psychiatric hospitalization, Colin's behavior remained unchanged. He continued to display aggression and emotional detachment. Worse, he openly threatened his mother. Medical records documented that he had no desire to return home and had even stated that if forced to live with Catherine, he would either take his own life or harm her. Despite these alarming statements, no further action was taken. Law enforcement was also aware of his behavioral issues. In February 2024, when he ran away to his grandmother's house again, officers took him into custody. When questioned, he repeated his threat. If sent back to his mother, he would hurt her. The authorities noted this, but rather than intervening, placed him back in the social services system. Before long, he was once again living with Catherine. By this point, she fully understood the danger he posed. In private conversations with friends, she admitted to being afraid of him, acknowledging his increasingly threatening behavior. She tried to keep the peace, hoping kindness might change him. In the spring of 2024, she began buying him expensive gifts, new gadgets, designer clothes, and money for outings. When he graduated from high school in May, she even bought him a car, believing these gestures would earn his affection and prove that she cared. Social media posts painted the picture of a happy family, vacation trips, shared meals, and quality time together. But behind the curated images, the tension was steadily building. Catherine reassured herself that she was doing everything she could, but deep down, she knew she was living with someone who might one day cross the line. And soon, he did. Just days before the tragic event, tensions between mother and son erupted again. On September 6, 2024, another argument broke out. Once again, Colin refused to contribute to household chores, and Catherine demanded that he stop ignoring her requests. He despised being told what to do, and his anger flared instantly. As the argument escalated, he stormed out of the house and headed straight to his grandmother's. This wasn't the first time he had run away to her home, but this time she was afraid. She knew what he was capable of and feared getting involved. When Catherine learned where her son was, she decided she could no longer let him do as he pleased. On the morning of September 8th, she called him, warning that if he didn't return home, she would have to contact the police and Child Protective Services. Colin ignored her. That afternoon, around 4 p.m., she drove to her mother's house to pick him up in person. Witnesses reported hearing a heated argument in the front yard. Several neighbors heard shouting, but only one woman saw what happened. She watched as Colin aggressively grabbed his mother by the hair and dragged her inside the house. Catherine struggled, pleading with him to let her go, but he didn't respond. The door slammed shut, and after that, everything went silent. No one called the police. The woman who had witnessed the altercation later admitted that she had been too afraid to intervene. 2 hours later, a call came into emergency services. Colin, speaking in a calm and steady voice, told the dispatcher that his mother was dead. He claimed that during their argument, Catherine had grabbed a knife and threatened him, but at some point, she had tripped and fallen onto the blade, fatally wounding herself. He emphasized that he had tried to help her, but it was already too late. When officers arrived at the scene, Colin was waiting outside. His demeanor did not match the gravity of the situation. He showed no distress or fear. The first thing he said to the officers was, "I know my rights. I need a lawyer." He did not attempt to explain further or even ask for help for his mother. Inside the house, police found Catherine's body. The scene Colin had described was inconsistent with reality. The knife had plunged too deep, and the wounds didn't align with his version of events. Investigators quickly concluded that this was not an accident, but an intentional act. As forensic experts processed the crime scene, they noted several inconsistencies. There were no signs of a struggle, no overturned furniture, no erratic blood patterns, no scratches on the floor. Catherine's body lay still, her blood pooled in one spot. The nature of her wound made an accidental fall nearly impossible. When the medical examiner arrived, a preliminary assessment confirmed these suspicions. The depth of the knife wound suggested significant force had been used. The angle of the injury made it highly improbable that Catherine had accidentally fallen onto the blade, as Colin described. Experts also noted the absence of defensive wounds on her hands, injuries typically seen when someone attempts to protect themselves. This suggested that she was either unaware of the danger or had been immobilized when the fatal wound was inflicted. Investigators then scrutinized Colin's statements and compared them to his emergency call. As they carefully reviewed the recording, one detail stood out. When the dispatcher asked whether his mother needed medical assistance, Colin made no effort to check if she could still be saved. Instead, he flatly stated that she was already dead. His detached tone and lack of urgency immediately raised suspicions. Investigators also examined the physical evidence within the house. A key question was whether Catherine had actually held the knife, as Colin claimed. Forensic analysis of the weapon's handle found no fingerprints belonging to her, only Colin's. This directly contradicted his statement that she had grabbed the knife first. Another major inconsistency was the absence of blood in the kitchen, where Colin alleged she had taken the weapon. Crime scene specialists meticulously inspected the countertops, floors, and other surfaces, yet found no traces of blood. If she had been carrying the knife before sustaining the fatal wound, some evidence of her movement should have been present, but there was none. One detective noted striking similarities between this case and a 2023 incident involving Charles Griffith. Reviewing the old case files, he observed the same pattern. Colin calling authorities immediately, delivering a calm, rehearsed statement showing no emotion, and quickly requesting a lawyer. Two separate crimes, yet identical behavior. Concerned by these findings, investigators requested an additional psychological evaluation of Colin and reviewed his past psychiatric hospitalization records. They discovered that, a year before his mother's death, he had explicitly told doctors he would either harm her or himself. In hindsight, those words became an ominous prediction of what was to come. Detectives also revisited witness testimonies. One neighbor recalled seeing Colin forcibly drag his mother into the house, while another had heard screaming, but never reported it. Now that the case had escalated to homicide, these details became crucial evidence, directly refuting Colin's claim that the incident was an accident. A breakthrough came when forensic specialists analyzed Colin's phone. They recovered deleted messages and search history from the week leading up to the crime, revealing searches such as fastest ways to kill someone, how long does it take to bleed out, and legal loopholes in homicide cases. These searches strongly suggested premeditation. Further evidence emerged when Catherine's friends revealed that just 2 days before her death, she had expressed deep fear for her life. She confided that if anything happened to her, her son would be responsible. It was a chilling warning, one that no one acted on in time. With overwhelming evidence, the Charlotte County District Attorney's Office formally charged Colin Griffith with first-degree murder. He was transferred to a detention facility to await trial. Investigators also collaborated with Oklahoma authorities to reopen the case of his father's death. Throughout the entire process, Colin displayed no remorse. He never inquired about his mother, showed no concern for his own fate, and remained emotionally detached. Officers who interrogated him all reached the same conclusion. Before them sat a cold, indifferent individual who had taken lives without a hint of regret. Following Colin Griffith's arrest, prosecutors ruled out reducing the charge, citing clear evidence of premeditation with no signs of self-defense. He was held in the county detention center while awaiting trial. Given the severity of the crime, prosecutors announced their intent to seek the maximum sentence, life in prison without parole. However, legal complications arose due to his age. Colin was 17 at the time of the crime, which could impact court proceedings. The prosecution filed a motion to have him tried as an adult, a request granted by the judge under Florida law, which allows minors to be prosecuted as adults in cases of severe crimes posing a public threat. During the trial, prosecutors presented compelling evidence of premeditation, including Colin's online searches about taking a life and forensic findings of deleted messages discussing legal loopholes in homicide cases. Eyewitness testimony further strengthened their case. Colin's defense attorneys argued that he was mentally unstable and may have acted impulsively. However, prosecutors introduced psychiatric records showing that he had been fully aware of his actions and had explicitly threatened his mother months before the crime, stating he would either harm her or himself. This became a key argument against his defense. Prosecutors also revisited Colin's past. In 2023, his father, Charles Griffith, had died under suspicious circumstances, but the case was closed due to insufficient evidence. Now, with a second crime and Colin's complete lack of remorse, Oklahoma authorities reopened the investigation into his father's death. Investigators interviewed Charles Griffith's friends, former colleagues, and Colin's classmates, searching for any indication that he had previously expressed a desire to harm his father. The Charlotte County DA's office provided Oklahoma authorities with materials from the current case, highlighting Colin's eerily consistent behavior across both incidents. New evidence soon emerged. A review of old school records uncovered a statement from a former student who recalled Colin saying he wished his father was gone and that life would be better without him. At the time, no one had taken it seriously. Now those words carried far darker implications. The Oklahoma District Attorney stated that if further evidence surfaced, Colin could face additional charges in his father's case. To proceed, investigators needed either new witnesses or direct proof contradicting his initial self-defense claim. Meanwhile, the trial for Catherine Griffith's murder continued. Prosecutors remained firm in seeking life without parole, emphasizing that Colin had never expressed remorse. His cold, emotionless demeanor, both in court and during interrogations, only reinforced their argument. His behavior mirrored how he had spoken about his father's death in 2023, detached, calculated, and indifferent.
State of Florida versus Colin Griffith. We, the jury, find as follows. As to the defendant in this case, the defendant, as to count 1, the defendant is not guilty. As to count 2, the defendant is not guilty. So say will, this 5th day of February, 2025.